Nah. That's better. Hello. Welcome to I Forgot. Today we're going to be carrying on with our book series. Action, Adrenaline, Adventure. Alex Rider. This is probably by far the best book in my opinion, Russian Roulette, and it's written by Anthony Horowitz. So let's do it. I'm gonna turn so the audio's better. Yeah, Laurie's doing his book, Cabin Fever. So we read the prologue in the last 2 episodes. Now we're doing chapter 1, which is in the letters are in Russian, but it says it in English underneath. Home. Yasha, we've run out of water. Go to the well. I can still hear my mother calling to me, and it's strange to think of myself as a 14-year-old boy, a single child, growing up in a village 600 miles from Moscow. I can see myself, stick thin, with long, fair hair, and blue eyes that always looked a little startled. Everyone tells me that I am small for my age, and they urge me to eat more protein. As if I can ever get my hands on anything that resembles fresh meat or fish. I've not yet spent many hundreds of hours working out, and my muscles are undeveloped. I'm sprawled out in the living room, watching the only television we have in our house. It's a huge, ugly box with a picture that often wavers and trembles, and there are hardly any channels to choose from. To make things worse, the electricity supply is unreliable, and you can be fairly sure that the moment you get interested in a film or news program, the image will suddenly flicker and die. You'll probably be left alone, sitting in the dark, but whenever I can, I tune into a documentary, which I devour. It is my only window to the outside world. I'm describing Russia, about 10 years before the end of the 20th century. It is not so long ago, and yet is already somewhere that no longer exists. The changes that began in the main cities became a tsunami that engulfed the entire country, although they took their time reaching the village where I lived. There was no running water in any of the houses, and so 3 times a day I had to make my way down to the well with a wooden harness over my shoulders and 2 metal buckets dragging down my arms. I sound like a peasant, and a lot of the time I must have looked like one, dressed in a baggy shirt with no collar and a waistcoat. As a matter of fact, I had a pair of American jeans, which had been sent to me from a present from a relative in Moscow. I can still remember everyone staring at me when I put them on. Jeans! They were like something from a distant planet. And my name was Yasha, not Yasin. Quite by accident, I got it changed. If I'm going to explain what happened to me and what I became, then I must begin here, in Estrov. Nobody speaks of it anymore. It is not on the map. According to Russian authorities, it never existed. But I remember it well. A village of about 1,000 wooden houses surrounded by farmland with a church, a shop, a police station, a bathhouse, and a river that was bright blue in the summer but freezing all year round. A single road ran through the middle of the village, but it was hardly needed as there were very few cars. Our neighbour, Mr. Vladimov, had a tractor that often rumbled past, billowing oily black smoke, but I was more used to being woken up by the sound of horses' hoofs. The village was wedged between thick forests in the North Hills to the southwest, so that the view was never really changed. Sometimes I would see planes flying overhead, and I thought of the people inside them, travelling to the other side of the world. If I was working in the garden, I would stand still and watch them, the wings blinking, the sunlight glinting on their metal skin until they had gone out of sight, leaving only the echo of their engines behind. They reminded me of who and what I was. Estrov was my world, and I certainly didn't need an aeroplane to get from one side to the other. My own home, where I lived with my parents, was a small and simple, made of painted wooden boards with shutters on either side of the windows and a weather vane that squeaked all night. If there was too much wind, it was quite closer to the church, set back from the main road with similar houses on either side. Or either side. How would you pronounce it, Laurie? Either or either.
Either.
Either. Oh, okay, I'll say either.
I forgot. I don't know.
My own home where I live with my parents, small simple, with shutters on either side of the windows and a weather vane that squeaked all night. There was too much wind. It was quite close to the church, set back from the main road with similar houses on either side. Flowers and brambles grew right beside the walls, and they were slowly creeping towards the roof. There were just 4 rooms. My parents slept upstairs. I had the room at the back, but I had to share it whenever anyone came to stay. My grandmother, who lived with us, had the same room next to mine, but she preferred to sleep in a sort of hole in the wall above the stove in the kitchen. She was very small, dark brown woman. When I was young, I used to think that she had been cooked by the flames. There was no railway station in Estrov. It was not considered important enough, nor was there a bus service or anything like that. I went to a school in a slightly larger village that liked to think of itself as a town. 2 miles away, down a track that was dusty and full of potholes in the summer, and thick with mud or covered in snow during the winter. The town was called Rosna. I walked there every day, no matter what the weather was. No matter what the weather, and I was beaten if I was late. My school was a big square brick building on 3 floors. All the classrooms were the same size. There were about 500 children in all, boys and girls. Some of them travelled in by train, pouring onto the platform with eyes that were still half closed with sleep. Rosnar did have a railway station, and they were very proud of it, decking it with flowers on public holidays, but it was actually a mean, running down little place, and 9 out of 10 trains didn't even bother to stop there. We students were all very smart. The girls wore black dresses and green aprons and had their hair tied back in ribbons. The boys looked like little soldiers, with grey uniforms and red scarves tied around our necks. And if we did well with our studies, we were given badges with slogans. For active work, school leader, that sort of thing. I really don't remember much of what I learned at school. Who does? History was important. History of Russia, of course. We were always learning poems by heart and had to recite them, standing to attention beside our desks. There was maths and science. Most of the teachers were women, but our headmaster was a man called Lavrov, and he had a furious temper. He was short, but he had huge shoulders and long arms, and I would often see him pick up the boy by the throat and pinning him against the wall. "You're not doing well, Leo. Today, Yakov," he would boom. "I'm sick of the sight of you. Buck up your ideas or get out of here." Even the teachers were terrified of him. Actually, he was a good man at heart. In Russia, we were brought up to respect our teachers, and it never occurred to me that his gigantic rages were anything unusual. I was very happy at school, and I did well. We had a star system. Every 2 weeks the teachers gave us a grade, and I was a 5-star student. We were called Piatiorka. My best subjects were physics and maths, and these were very important to the Russian authorities. Nobody ever let you forget that we were the country that sent the first man, Yuri Gagarin, into space. There was even a photo of him in the front entrance, and you were supposed to salute him as you came in. I was also good at sport, and I remember how the girls in my class used to come along and cheer me when I scored a goal. I wasn't that interested in girls at the time, which is to say that I was happy to chat to them, but I didn't particularly want to hang out with them after school. My best friend was Leo, that I just mentioned, and the two of us were inseparable. Leo Treyakov was short and skinny, with jutting out ears, freckles and ginger hair. He used to joke that he was the ugliest boy in the district, and I found it hard to disagree. He was also far from bright. He was a 2-star student, a dismal dvoika, and he was always getting into trouble with the teachers. In the end, they actually gave up to punishing him because it didn't seem to make any difference, and he just sat there quietly daydreaming at the back of the class. But at the same time, he was star of the NVP, military training classes, which were compulsory throughout the school. Leo could strip down an AK-47 automatic machine gun in 12 seconds and reassemble it in 15. He was a great shot, and twice a year there were military games where he had to compete with other schools using a map and compass to find our way through the woods. Leo was always in charge, and we always won. I liked Leo because he was afraid of nothing, and he always made me laugh. We did everything together. We would eat our sandwiches in the yard, wash down with a gulp of vodka that he had stolen from home and brought to school in one of his mother's old perfume bottles. We smoked cigarettes in the woodland close to the main building, coughing horribly because the tobacco was so rough. Our school toilets had no compartments, and we often sat next to each other doing what we had to do, which may sound disgusting, but the way it was, you were meant to bring your own may sound disgusting, but that was the way it was. You were meant to bring your own toilet paper too. But Leo always forgot, and I would watch him guiltily tearing pages out of his exercise books. He was always losing his homework that way, but with Leo's homework, he'd have been the first to admit it. That was probably all it was worth. The best time we had together was in the summer, when we would go for endless bicycle rides, rattling along the country roads, shooting down hills and pedalling backwards furiously, which is the only way to stop. Everyone had the exact same model of bicycle, and they were all death traps with no suspension, no lights, and no brakes. We had nowhere to go in, but in a way, that was the fun of it. We had nowhere to go, but in a way, that was the fun of it. We used our imagination to create a world of wolves and vampires, ghosts and Cossack warriors. We chased each other right through the middle of them. We finally got back to the village. We would swim in the river, even though there are parasites in the water that could make you sick. We always went to the bathhouse together, thrashing each other with birch leaves in the steam room, which was meant to be good for your skin. Leo's parents worked in the same factory as mine, although my father, who had once studied at Moscow State University, was the senior of the two. The factory employed about 200 people who were collected by coaches from Estrov, Rosna, and a lot of other places. I have to say the place was a source of constant puzzlement to me. Why was it tucked away in the middle of nowhere? Why had I never seen it? Why was there barbed wire fence surrounding it and armed militia standing at the gate? And that didn't make sense either. All it was produced was pesticides and other chemicals used by fathers, but when I asked my parents about it, they always changed the subjects. Leo's father was the transporting manager in charge of the coaches. My father was a research chemist. My mother worked in the main office doing paperwork. That was as much as I knew. In the end of the afternoon, Leo and I would often sit close to the river, and we would talk about the future. The truth was that just about everyone wanted to leave Estrov. Outside work, there was nothing to do, and half the people who lived there were perpetually drunk. I'm not making it up. During the winter months, they weren't allowed to open the village shop because before 10 o'clock in the morning, people would rush in as soon as it was light to buy their vodka. And during December and January, it wasn't unusual to see some of the local farmers flat on their backs, half covered in snow, and were probably half dead too after downing a whole bottle. We were all being left behind in a fast-changing world. Why my parents had ever chosen to come here was another mystery. Okay, well, the chapter's pretty long, so I'm going to stop there. We'll have a part 2 of the chapter next week. And maybe some of the next chapter. But thank you for listening. This was Russian Roulette, Alex Rider by Anthony Horowitz. And it's an autobiography of Yasin Grigorovich, who is the assassin that tries to kill Alex Rider many times. Thank you for listening to I Forgot Podcast. Please subscribe. And see you next time. Bye.